In this video, I'm going to use geometry nodes to create this pulsating rings animation effect. Here you can see we have a few rings originating from the base and moving apart and then coming back together, all while they are moving upwards. And we also have another animation going on at the base where we have continuous rings originating out from the origin and they are fading away as they move away from the center. Let's add a cube. And next I will open a geometry nodes tree. I'll delete the input and add a curved circle over here. Connect it to the output. You can see in the viewport we have a circle. Let's reduce the resolution to 16 and increase the radius to 2 meters. Then I'll add transform geometry node. Let's add one more transform geometry node. Let's add a sample index node. And connect a position node to the value input. Here I'm trying to sample the first point in this circle because I need its z coordinate value. Connect separate xyz, extend the z output into a map range node. In the map range node we have from parameters and to parameters. So this node translates the from minimum and maximum to minimum and maximum. So let's say if we move our circle from 0 to 3 in z coordinate or z axis, the output of map range will be 0 to 1. Now let's connect the result of map range to float curve node. And in this float curve node, I will try to reshape this curve. Both the ends will be at the bottom and the middle point will have the maximum value. So the output of float curve will be 0 if the output of map range is 0 or 1. If it is 0.5, the output of float curve will be 1. Let's connect the output of float curve to a multiplier node. This node of multiplication will be helpful in changing the width of this circle. Let's connect the output to combine xyz and connect the output of combine xyz to scale in transform geometry. Let's try to change the value of z in transform geometry. We can see the radius of the circle changing as we change the value in z. However, it is not moving upwards. So let's try to check that. It should also move upwards when we are changing the value of z in the first transform geometry node. Alright, so in combine xyz, the value of z coordinate should be 1 and not 0. Now let's change the value of z coordinate over here. And there you go. Our circle is also moving upwards and its radius is also varying. So you can see at the bottom and at the top, the radius is at its minimum for this circle, and at the middle, it has the maximum radius. Now let's try to automate this change in z coordinate value. For that, we'll add combine xyz like this. and then connect a wrap node to the Z input. Change the maximum value to 3 and minimum value to 1. Sorry, minimum value to 0. And then I'll connect a scene time and multiply node to my wrap node. The output of wrap node will oscillate between 0 and 3. With this multiply node, you can change the speed of the animation. There you go. So now it is automatically changing the value of z coordinate in transform geometry from 0 to 3 and back to 0. Let me change the FPS frame rate. Okay, like I said before, this multiply node will help us in reducing the area used by the circle. Now I will add a few instances to this curve circle. For that I can use instance on points node. To the instance input, I will add another curve circle node. And then add a curve to mesh node. To the profile input of curve to mesh, I'll add another curve circle node. But I'll keep a smaller radius for this profile curve. So now we have our rings ready. They are also looking like donuts. Let's add a transform geometry. I've added this to rotate these rings. Let's make it 90-degree in y coordinate under rotation. So we have all our rings rotated. Let's also add some rotation for these rings individually. And we can do that by adding keyframe to z rotation coordinates. So add two keyframes, one at the first frame and the second one at the last frame. So at the last frame, the value will be 1080 degrees, and at the first frame, it will be 0 degrees. So there you go. Our rings are not just moving upward, they are also rotating on their own axis. Now let's add some texture and lightings to these rings. For that, we can create a new material. Select the same material in the node, set material. And in the shader editor, we can specify the colors. For example, we can select this greenish color. Feel free to change these parameters values. And I'm also adding the same color or similar color in the emission field. Also increase the strength of emission to 3 or 2 as per your preference. And in the render view, it will look something like this. So now our rings are self-illuminating. We don't need any external light. Now let's try to add a base, and we will also add some animation to it. For that, I'll add join geometry node between instance on points and group output. Let's add mesh circle and connect it to join geometry. So in the viewport, you can see we have a circle at the center, and let's keep its radius around 1.5 for the time being. I'll add a set material node between mesh circle and join geometry and create a new material for this circle. Let's call it base. In the set material node, select the same material, base, and now in the shading editor, we can work on this new material base. Let me copy this color code. I'll use the same color for my base. So here under emission, I'm going to use the same color, and I've increased the strength to 2. Let's add a color ramp. Connect it to principal BSDF base color. Wait a minute. Instead of connecting it to the base color, let's connect it to the emission color. And instead of white, I'm going to use the same color in color ramp as well. Now let's bring in wave texture, connect it to color ramp, and select wave type as rings. And also use the Z coordinate system. Select wave texture node and press Ctrl T on your keyboard. Texture coordinate and mapping nodes will appear. Connect texture coordinate object to mapping, and you can see we have circular pattern. Now let's reduce the value of scale. Here you can see we have bigger circular patterns now. Let me play around with the color RAM node. Now let's add a gradient texture node. Select the node and press Ctrl T on your keyboard. Connect object output of texture coordinate to the vector input in mapping node. Add a color ramp to gradient texture. And while selecting color ramp, press Ctrl Shift and left click on your mouse. Also reduce the X and Y scale. So we will get a circular pattern like this. At the center, we have a lighter shade, and around the border of the circle, we have darker shade thanks to this gradient texture node setup. Now let's add mix color node. and connect the output of gradient texture color ramp to B input of color mixer. And then I'll connect the output of wave texture color ramp to the A input. Select darken mode and connect the result to alpha in principal BSDF node. And finally connect the output of principal BSDF to material output. And in the settings inside panel, change the render method to blended. Increase the value of factor to 1 and let me also add the timeline at the bottom. So here I will add some keyframes to the phase offset input in wave texture node. So as you can see, if I change the value of phase offset, the circular rings or circular patterns in the base, they are getting animated. So we will set two keyframes, one at the first frame and the other one at the last frame. And this is the kind of animation you can achieve. Let's increase the radius to 3 meters. And change the value of the second keyframe to -60. This is up to you. You can use other set of values for phase offset input and wave texture. For the timing, let's keep it that way. Here I'm trying to adjust the base and its gradient. Since I have increased the radius of the base circle, that's why I'm adjusting this gradient again. This is how you can change the width of the rings at the base. So this is one of the VFX effects that we can create with the help of geometry nodes and shader editor in Blender.